Wars don't start with bombs. They start with memos, with policies, with whispers in the office of politicians and small changes in big contracts. We've been trained to think war begins with an explosion, but what if it begins with a PowerPoint? Because the elite don't need to start wars. They just build conditions where war becomes inevitable. And once you learn to see those conditions, you'll spot them everywhere. In this video, we break down how conflict is manufactured, piece by piece. Let's dive in. Normal people don't see war as business, but it is. And in 2003, business was booming. As American tanks rolled into Iraq, flags flying, missiles launching, something else moved even faster. Defense contractor stocks, oil futures, private military deals. The battlefield wasn't the only front. Wall Street was locked and loaded. This war didn't start with bullets. It started with a story.
Saddam Hussein is determined to get his hands on a nuclear bomb.
Nuclear weapon. Weapons of mass destruction.
Those lines weren't just quotes. They were marketing slogans. Cable news ran mushroom clouds on loop. Fear sold airtime.
War!
War.
War!
No war in...
Fear sold war. Colin Powell held up a tiny vial at the UN.
Saddam Hussein has chemical weapons. Saddam Hussein has used such weapons. And Saddam Hussein has no compunction about using them again.
This could be anthrax. It was a theater, and the world watched like it was a prophecy. Then came headlines. US says Hussein intensifies quest for A-bomb parts. The public was convinced. Saddam equals nukes, Iraq equals 9/11, and most importantly, doing nothing equals mass death. By the time the first missile hit Baghdad, there wasn't a national debate. There was just momentum, and while America stared at explosions on screen, companies like Halliburton were already counting profits. Contracts signed, supply chains moving, oil zones mapped. This wasn't about rogue threats. It was about engineered incentives. War equals billion-dollar deals. War equals global access to resources. War equals political distraction. And for the elite, war meant return on investments. Mission accomplished, said banner behind Bush, May 2003. But the insurgency hadn't even begun. Didn't matter. The capital was already flowing. Weapons, logistics, reconstruction, private armies, a trillion-dollar pipeline of profit, built not on truth, but on narrative. This is how modern power operates, not through triggers, but through tension, through fear, through emotional engineering. It doesn't force war, it creates the gravity that pulls nations toward it. But that gravity, who shaped it? Who created the landscape that made war not just possible, but profitable? To answer that, we have to zoom out further. We have established that wars don't begin in trenches, they begin in boardrooms, in places most of us will never see, behind frosted glass, beneath logos that sound like universities. Think tanks. They have names like the Project for the New American Century, American Enterprise Institute, and Council on Foreign Relations. Official, academics, neutral sounding. But these aren't just policy wonks debating ethics. They're architects of influence. Before September 11th, PANAC, a neoconservative think tank, was already drafting the blueprint for regime change in Iraq. In a 2000 paper titled Rebuilding America's Defenses, they wrote, "The process of transformation is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor." A year later, the Twin Towers fell, and like clockwork, the pieces moved. The policies were ready, the players were in place. September 11th was the tragedy. The justification was pre-written. These think tanks don't just suggest policy, they seed ideas. They shape entire paradigms. They release papers that become doctrine. They write speeches that become action. They frame wars as necessary, strategic, inevitable. And they are not neutral. Many are funded by defense companies, energy giants, foreign governments, and billionaire ideologues. They're not planning peace, they're designing markets for chaos. Because if you can control the narrative, you don't need to fire a shot. You just need to change the way people think. And once the public believes war is freedom, defense, or stability, they'll beg for it. Sometimes war looks like tanks. Sometimes it looks like a spreadsheet. The financial crash, the global economy collapses. Millions lose homes, jobs, savings. To the public, a disaster. To the elite, a planned detonation. Banks that caused the collapse, bailed out. CEOs who oversaw the fraud, bonused. Economists who missed every red flag, promoted. Too big to fail wasn't a warning. It was a business model. Instability became a strategy. Here's the playbook. Inflate a bubble with cheap money and deregulation. Let it burst on schedule. Collect the bailouts. Buy up assets for pennies on the dollar. Collapse, profit, repeat. It works in finance. It works in war. It works in the media. A pandemic. Great time to consolidate industries. A protest movement. Perfect cover for expanding surveillance. A cyber attack. Excuse to militarize the internet. This is the logic of crisis capitalism. When the world burns, the powerful don't panic. They shop, and they don't need to wait for chaos. They can manufacture it. Now we enter the newest front, the one inside your pocket. The war for perception. Let's rewind to Ukraine. Not the front lines, but the back end.
Принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
When Russia invaded, who kept Ukraine online? Not NATO, not the UN, Starlink, a private company, controlled by a billionaire. Suddenly, Elon Musk had more operational power than most governments. Cloudflare blocked cyber attacks. Meta curated the narrative. Google updated the map. It wasn't generals deciding the information battlefield, it was tech CEOs. The infrastructure of modern war is no longer military, it's digital. Tech giants decide who gets seen, who gets silenced, what becomes truth, and what gets erased. And this isn't just about social media, it's about reality. Because if you can control what billions of people see, feel, and believe, you control the world. Your location, your habits, your fears, tracked, profiled, sold, to advertisers, to politicians, to governments, to militaries. And you don't need to opt in, you just need to keep scrolling. This isn't the future, it's already here. And in this new war, there are no borders, just data, just attention, just manipulation, on autopilot. Because if they can shape your reality, they don't need to own your land. They already own your mind. By now, one thing is clear. The elite don't start wars. They shape conditions. They steer narratives. They manufacture urgency, not with force, but with framing. Not with dictators, but with incentives. And most of it happens in plain sight. Think tanks publish. Billionaires tweet. Platforms tweak the algorithm. It's not a conspiracy. It's a business model. Crisis sells. And when we're scared, exhausted, confused, we don't resist, we comply. The future isn't forced, it's forecasted, then built to match the prediction. If you've made it this far, you now understand the blueprint. Wars don't erupt, they're cultivated, not with flags, but with fear. Not by tyrants, but by systems that reward tension. And next time you see a crisis, ask the question they hope you never ask. Who benefits from this? Well, in simple terms, it is the ultra-rich people who own the big companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, but even Tesla, Amazon, Facebook, and some of the most powerful politicians in the world. If you want a deep dive on who the individuals are, please let me know and I will make a video about it. So, hit that button. Stay awake, because once you see how they build the conditions, you'll never be fooled by the conflict again.